On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, it's the December 13th, 2021 edition of What the Ship is Going On, top 5 news stories in the maritime sector. Hi, I'm your host, Sal Mercaglano. I'm the chair of the Department of History, Criminal Justice, and Political Science here at Campbell University, former merchant mariner and an instructor in maritime history, maritime industry policy, and maritime security. So, 5 stories to hit you up with on this day. Plenty to choose from, so much going on out there. But the story I want to start with was one that really resonated with me. I don't want to save it for the end. I want to hit it. Story number 1 here, and it deals with the plight of merchant mariners at sea. This story by the Wall Street Journal really exposes the fact that merchant mariners have a pretty tough plight, including these guys who were basically abandoned by the ship owner on their vessel. This is the crew of the MV Hajj Abdullah. And basically the story talks about how the owners, the flag state, which in this case is Sierra Leone, basically abandoned this crew to their own devices. It is a powerful, powerful story. Joe Parkinson and Drew Henshaw did a great job. And then just to give you a piece of this article, with SOS in the tagline on October 26th, email from the crew of the MV Hajj Abdullah said that the hull of the 260-foot vessel was cracked, seawater was sloshing over the deck and into the diesel fuel. The sailors were almost out of food, and the months had passed since the ship's owner had last paid them. The waters around them were notorious for piracy, although piracy had pretty died out off the coast of Somalia by this point. For more than 2 months, the Hajj Abdullah's request for assistance had ricocheted around the international shipping system without any help responding. The ship's London-based insurer canceled its coverage, saying the ship was unseaworthy. The ship's Lebanese, Egyptian, and Syrian crew had been abandoned by the Lebanese owner. They were sailing under the jurisdiction of Sierra Leone. The Sierra Leone Maritime Administration regulates hundreds of ships transporting billions of dollars of cargo, relying on a management company operating on the outskirts of Limassol, Cyprus. The crew petitioned the Cyprus office for help. Under the laws of the West African nation, its maritime authorities weren't required to do much for the Hajj Abdullah. This story is absolutely tragic. This ship is now off the coast of East Africa, but basically it's a common story of a ship and its crew being abandoned by its owners and basically faring for themselves. Sierra Leone is a flag of convenience, not a lot of impetus behind them to do anything. And Drew and Joe do a great job of really detailing this. I actually was interviewed by them twice to give them some background information on maritime sector, and they have done a phenomenal bit of research here talking about the crew of this vessel. There's another story in Splash 24/7, The Never Forgotten. This is by Alison Cusack. Excuse me. Alison is an attorney in Australia, and she really resonated a piece here where she talked about the fact that Ever Given propelled the maritime industry into the forefront. And in particular, one of the things that she wanted to talk about is the role of the merchant mariner. She wants 2022 to be the year the public discovers seafarers. We know about the ships, but we need to know about the seafarers. And so I thought that for story number 1, really highlight the story of the seafarers. Again, throughout COVID-19, cargo has moved. We've seen the 1.5 million seafarers out there moving the world's ships without much fanfare and with, I would argue, a lot of problems. And we're going to talk about one of those stories coming up here. But for story number 1, really highlighting this issue here of the seafarers. So for story number 2, we go the complete opposite end of the seafarers, and this takes us to the International Maritime Organization based in London. The IMO, which is the international regulatory body, which allows, unfortunately, Sierra Leone to get away with registering ships like the Hajj Abdullah, just elected its new 40-member council. And that 40-member council basically is kind of the mini UN assembly that is created to oversee international shipping. And there are basically 3 categories of these. And these 3 categories are organized. The category A are 10 member states that have the largest interest in providing international shipping services. And we see China, Greece, Italy, Japan, Norway, Panama, Korea, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Even though the US does not have a large merchant marine, there is large American ownership of ships out there. And Panama, which is not a big owner of vessels, has one of the largest registries of vessels out there. Category B are 10 states with the largest interest in international seaborne trade. And that's an interesting group right there, because you see Australia, Brazil, Canada, France, Germany, India, the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and the United Arab Emirates. And then finally, the last group are 20 states that have special interest in maritime transport or navigation. So you see a interesting group right there. What you don't see in there, for example, are ships with or flags that have the largest registries. Liberia is nowhere in here. The Marshall Islands is not in here. We don't see Hong Kong in here. And so it's really interesting to see the size and makeup of this. I should note that the 40-member IMO is about to change. It's about to expand to 52 members, but that's not going to be done until a vote by the IMO membership. They're going to need 116 members to vote on that out of the 174 member states and 2 associate members. That's not going to be done until December 15th, when the IMO has its first meeting with its new 40-member council, and they elect its chair and vice chair. I'll also mention that there are some initiatives being pushed on the IMO. One comes from the United States. Secretary Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation, is pushing on the IMO to address the issue of SASH, sexual assault and sexual harassment. They want this to be taken up by the International Maritime Organization. I should mention concurrently, we've done stories about SASH issues with the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. A recent report came out highlighting this, but a story came out on G-Captain this week on the U.S. Coast Guard getting ready to pursue investigations of sexual assault on U.S. flagged vessels. And I would argue that this is an issue that needs to be done. One of the things I've talked with a lot of women in the maritime industry is they feel that if a sexual harassment or sexual assault takes place on U.S. vessels, the Coast Guard is not going to prosecute it. Having sailed on vessels, I will tell you, if you spill 10 gallons of fuel oil into the ocean, you're about to have the world come on board your vessel and investigate. But at the same time, sexual harassment, many people feel like that no investigation will be done at all about this. And the fact that the Coast Guard is now publicly saying this is a good thing. They should have been doing this for a long time, in my opinion. But the Coast Guard Investigative Service, the CGIS, the Coast Guard version of NCIS, will initiate investigation and gather additional resource information for all reports of sexual assault or other crimes at sea. This needed to be done, and it's good that it's being done. It is just a bit late, but we're seeing these impetuses being done now by IMO. Buttigieg is calling on the IMO to do this for international vessels, and the U.S. Coast Guard doing it for U.S. flag vessels. That's story number 2. So story number 3 are our update stories. So we're going to update 3 big stories that are going on. Obviously, LA and Long Beach is number 1. This infographic came out by FreightWaves the other day, I think it was on Friday, where they basically are looking at the container ships off the port. And by including these vessels in red, these are the vessels that are far out to sea. You'll see that the ships waiting to get into LA and Long Beach are at the highest level that they've been. There's been a lot of reports that have been investigating this. The Bloomberg report right here, vanishing ships underscore supply woe. Crisis peak is a mirage. We're seeing this. We're seeing these reports finally busting through. Bloomberg's doing it. We're seeing it on some other news sources where they're really starting to question the numbers and how they're being derived. I will say that the Marine Exchange of Southern California have on their Facebook page real detailed information on the number of vessels out there. But when you just go to marine traffic, you'll see this. This is the anchorage right off LA and Long Beach, less vessels there than before. And even in the drift zone here between Avalon and up to Santa Barbara, we don't see as many vessels, but when you zoom out, you start seeing those vessels hanging there. I flagged just two of them. This is the Navios Amarillo. She sailed from Busan, Korea on November 17th. She is an ETA into LA on January 2nd. She is sitting here off of Baja, California in Mexico. And she's going to be sitting there out to sea for more than 47 days. That is less time than it took Columbus to sail across the Atlantic to the New World. It's going to take Navios Amarillo more time than that to cross the Pacific. Same time, you have these other vessels. Here is the Maersk Esmeralda. She is due into LA on January 11th, but she sailed from Xiamen, China on December 1st, and she is just sitting off the coast of China right now. She is basically drifting and is not going to head out into the Pacific until much later. She has an ETA in on January 11th. And so she's sitting here off the coast of China right now, just biding time. And this is what we're seeing with LA and Long Beach right now. And if you go into these stories, we're seeing what the issue is. This story by Bloomberg, Southern California's empty container problem is getting worse. Truckers say the number of empty containers there are piling up in the port of LA and Long Beach. Did receive a report from someone who I completely trust, who told me that the port of LA recently prevented a ship from sailing, would not send line handlers down to throw the lines off, would not send a pilot until that vessel was fully loaded with containers to go back. They're not letting the ship sail light off the berths anymore, which is good. Now, that was one case. Whether it's being done at all the terminals in LA and Long Beach, we're not sure, but we know that was being done. But one of the things we're seeing here are these continual stories. So, for example, there are nuts languishing in Southern California. Yes, our nation's nuts are not being shipped across to China. I guess I should have said walnuts, but you got the idea. But this is hurting U.S. farmers. It's not a joking matter. I mean, basically, American exports are not being sent off. And I have to say, I got into it with a Journal of Commerce reporter the other day regarding this. And the comment from the Journal of Commerce reporter was, well, then the U.S. exporters will have to pay more to get their cargo off. Understand that shippers are prioritizing empty containers over American exports. And they'd rather take an empty container that's not paying anything than a U.S. exporter paying something. And this is why the FMC has begun this investigation into this. This is why you have gotten the Ocean Reform Act of 2021 coming out of the House of Representatives, is because of issues like this. And when you go on a little bit more here into LA and Long Beach, you know, the Biden-backed plan to clear California port congestion stalls, I think this is true. I think one of the things we're going to find out here is that LA and Long Beach are not moving as many containers as they were. And that is a systematic problem for the ports in that area. So, for example, when you look at some details coming out right now, Port of Savannah sets monthly record for November. Port of Houston trade jumps 51%, nearly 17 billion. Yet when you look at the data coming out of Long Beach containers fell by 5% in November. We do not have numbers yet for Los Angeles. They usually come out in the middle of the month, but I'm predicting that they're going to be down. They're going to be down quite a bit compared to last year, which means LA and Long Beach are moving less containers than last year, yet they have record number of vessels sitting off the berth. And that represents a systematic problem. What does that mean? Well, Lodestar's story right here, U.S. coastal shift gaining traction as shippers review routes and emissions. We're seeing some liners start to bypass LA and Long Beach. Here, MSC's transfer last month of its standalone Trans-Pacific Santa Ana service from the U.S. West Coast to the East could see other carriers follow suit. Will carriers begin to bypass LA and Long Beach to go other places? Where this is a very small case right now. I would not say we're going to see this yet. But LA and Long Beach has got to get ahead of the problem they're facing, which is clearing that backlog out of the terminals. And this story right here from Bloomberg, Port of Los Angeles' Gene Soroka sees supply chain snarls lasting to end of 2022, a year from now coming in. So obviously LA and Long Beach still has a lot to do. And again, why we focus on LA and Long Beach, 40% of all containers come through LA Long Beach. So what happens in LA Long Beach resonates around the country. Other updates we're seeing in Asia, for example, in Europe, shipping alliances are dropping hundreds of Asia, North Europe port calls due to congestion. We're seeing what's called blank sailings. Because ships are delayed, they can't do the turnarounds as fast as they can. Shipping companies are going to start emitting calls to ports. And we're seeing this. We saw this with Savannah getting bypassed recently, Port of Boston being bypassed. And now in Europe, we're seeing this where ports are being bypassed. You see right here, the consultant found that 3 alliances had canceled 383 calls during this period for the last quarter due to port congestion. So we're seeing it in Europe. Up in Canada, Vancouver, we're still seeing that backlog being cleared out right now. We know that the backlog is taking place. Rail lines have reopened between Vancouver and the rest of the nation. However, we're seeing this happen. And I got this report from a person on Twitter, which I really wanted to share right here, showing you vessels that were in Vancouver on January 12th, those up at Prince Rupert, and how some vessels have shifted over to Prince Rupert. We see them right here, several vessels moving over and clearing off the berth. But even as of December 12th, we're seeing a pretty good substantial number of TEUs, almost 100,000 TEUs afloat right now off of Vancouver, and even off Prince Rupert. They're getting a handle on it, but we're seeing that congestion still existing. And remember, the rail lines have reopened, the highways are open, but we're still dependent on weather right now. And so what happens with Vancouver has already taken place because of the delays. And then finally, last update, the timber vessel, this is the vessel Almirante Storni off the coast of Sweden, where she suffered that fire. This is an image of her from G Captain, but a really most updated image here. Here we go. Almirante Storni arrives at dock in Gothenburg, coming in with the fire under control. You'll see this is timber packed in this white packing. You'll see a lot of that has burnt off, and there's some better images here. This video is really good. I'll show you this video right here of, I will fix this. Here's the video of Almirante Storni coming into Gothenburg. You'll see the wood stacks broken up. This is done largely by the water spray, the water pressure, but you can see the burnt out piles right there. They're still worried about fire on board, obviously down deep inside that wood stack, but they're gonna have to just start pulling this lumber off as the vessel comes in to really make sure that the fire does not reignite. They don't want to set sail and have this fire rekindle again out at sea. So you'll see them coming in the port right here. And they had used massive amounts of water to put this fire out. Fortunately, this fire was above deck, not below deck. But you'll see the use of the Swedish, Norwegian Coast Guard, and also salvage tugs and rescue vessels here. This is a thermal image, really impressive. You see the heat plume right there coming in, and the effort to put it out. You'll see the heat inside the vessel when the fire was burning, really out of control. So a great job by the Swedish, Norwegian officials there to bring Almirante Storni into port. So that's story, long story, but it was story number 3. Story number 4 brings us to China, and man, just when you think we're out of it, we're back into it again. So 2 stories out of China that have an impact on trade. First one, Bloomberg story, Chinese seafarers face crew change challenges. So one of the issues that they're highlighting in this story is the difficulty in crew changes in China, what they're calling the 14+7. The country's rules have it so that they have to spend a minimum 14 days in a hotel before they can board a vessel, followed by 3 days, by 7 days of home confinement getting off. So it's 21 days for them basically getting off a vessel. And it's the same going on, by the way. They have to quarantine going on a vessel. And what this means is, and the story says, ONE, which is the large Japanese carrier, and Hapag-Lloyd, the large German carrier, have stopped taking new bookings for container shipments to South China's smaller ports, a decision prompted by a lack of feeder ships. These are smaller container ships that bring containers from smaller ports to the larger ports for the Trans-Pacific, Trans-Europe routes to haul the boxes amid a labor crunch. This means, by the way, that the feeder ships that are bringing those containers in are going to be delayed, and that means loading of vessels is going to slow down, which sounds great. It sounds like, okay, well, we can get a handle on things. We can get caught up. Yes, but it also means delays. Cargo that was going to sail, that was booked, that was on time-sensitive routings. Understand, ships going into LA and Long Beach, some of them are going right into berth because they're part of a regular schedule. They are not seeing delays. The ships that are seeing these huge delays are these lifts of opportunity, these new shipping companies that are loading to get onto any berth. But the routine service, the liner service, is getting on as scheduled. This means that that liner service can be impacted, which is going to have potential problems. Add to this story, new Ningbo lockdown shows COVID threat hanging over supply chains. A partial lockdown in the port of Ningbo, we've seen this in the past, highlights the threat. Now, all of a sudden, we're seeing a shutdown of one of the largest ports in China, Omicron. The potential for that spread means that we could see more shutdowns, and this could have a domino effect. Feeder service not providing in China, shutdown of ports. What does that mean? Well, we're seeing box rates climb right now. We thought box rates were going to start coming down, but they're not. When you look at the rates coming in, he doesn't have a graph here, but what we see is the box rates are plateauing and actually going back up again. They're not coming down. And at the same time, the Chinese, being the Chinese, are always looking to the future, broke ground on a new port in Yantian, where they're talking about a new port that's going to be able to handle 3 million TEU a year. This at a cost of 2.28 billion US dollars. So China, again, is really the linchpin for the world global supply chain. And we're seeing that right now, this slowdown of the feeder service, the shutdown of Ningbo, the escalating rates for containers, and now China just doubling down with construction of a new terminal. Just really demonstrates the power of China in the global supply chain. That was story number 4. And as always, story number 5 is my choice, my personal choice. And this is a story that is, to me, a good one, but also one of concern. And this is the keel laying for the new first national security multi-mission vessel at the Philadelphia shipyard, or Philly shipyard as it's called. This vessel here is going to be one of 5 new training vessels for state maritime academies. There are 5 state maritime academies along the East Gulf and West Coast: California Maritime, Texas, SUNY Maritime, which is the State University of New York Maritime College, which is the finest maritime college there is, first and foremost. Massachusetts Maritime Academy, not that great. And then Maine Maritime Academy. There's also the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, the Federal Academy, and then in Michigan, there's Great Lakes Maritime Academy. But the 5 large state academies on the East Gulf and West Coast are all receiving these new training vessels, with SUNY Maritime earmarked to get the first. And the keel was laid at the Philly shipyard for this new vessel. Now, in the past, training vessels had come from the commercial merchant marine or from the U.S. Navy. The problem is there are no commercial vessels or Navy vessels suitable for this. So the Department of Transportation, in conjunction with a contract with Tote Marine, and is building these 5 vessels at Philly. And there's a whole keel laying ceremony video here that's in the Marine Link video, or in the Marine Link story, available for you. But this story, and also a great story right here, New Day for the American Merchant Marine, written by me, on what these vessels mean. But it's great that they're being done, but it also shows the really poor state of the U.S. Merchant Marine, that there aren't suitable vessels that are coming out of the Merchant Marine for use as training vessels. We have to build purpose-built vessels. Now, at the same time, I think this should be a moment where we start thinking about investing back in our national maritime infrastructure, shipyards, shipping, mariners, you name it. So I think this is a moment to really start thinking about this. And the laying of this keel is an important first step. We're going to see 5 of these built very quickly out of Philadelphia Shipyard. And it would be great if we can follow up ship construction at Philadelphia Shipyard with some American vessels. American vessels are going to cost more. Why? Because China and Korea and Japan do things to subsidize their vessels. But China, Japan, and Korea build 94% of the world's commercial vessels. We, the United States, which had been number 1, build 0.2%. Yes, 0.2% of commercial vessels in the world are built in the United States. And that